I'm still excited when it comes to Velodrome and its native token called Velo. Let's say maybe it reaches in a make-believe scenario the price of $2 during a fully fledged type of altcoin season. I wouldn't find that as something that would surprise me too much, even though nothing I say is financial advice, and let me explain why. It's because when I take a look at Velodrome, I think arguably it does fit a pretty cool niche. Let me explain what I mean by this. Of course, Velodrome is a decentralized exchange, but then it's actually on Optimism, which I think is pretty awesome because if we take a look at Optimism, it is a very popular Ethereum layer 2. And let me explain what an Ethereum layer 2 is real quick because an Ethereum layer 2 basically it allows Ethereum to kind of be enjoyed, but at the same time not necessarily having to deal with kind of the drawbacks that sometimes people are not a fan of. Like for instance, we take a look at the sky high gas fees of Ethereum, which I'm not a fan of, and also on top of that, we take a look at the arguable scalability issues, which I'm also not a fan of. So again, Ethereum, it is very popular, it is very famous, adoption is fantastic. So it would be kind of, you know, a shame, right? If let's say there was no way to kind of tap into that, but then not having to deal with kind of those drawbacks I mentioned before. So there are layer twos out there, like for instance, Optimism. There's also Arbitrum, and there's even something called the base network. Now, this is where things get a little bit more exciting because this actually kind of is related a little bit to Optimism. Optimism actually helped build the base network, and keep in mind, the base network is Coinbase's layer 2, so that's pretty awesome. Not to mention, you also have to consider this. Now, things get a little bit more exciting here as well. On the base network, there is a decentralized exchange called Aerodrome. Now, Aerodrome is very popular, but then the thing is, Aerodrome is actually a fork of Velodrome. So I think this whole thing kind of makes sense now, right? This is why I think Velodrome is so unique. However, even despite Aerodrome being a fork of Velodrome, I would say that Aerodrome is more popular right now. I would say that, again, it just has more recognition because I think of the base network and then, kind of the association that it has with, the name value of Coinbase, right? And Coinbase, of course, publicly listed. It's even on the S&P 500, so I get that. But then Velodrome, man, I'm still very excited with it nonetheless because I think if, let's say, during a fully fledged type of altcoin season, Aerodrome really has a lot of attention, maybe some of it, if it were to trickle kind of down to Velodrome, it wouldn't surprise me. And I think being a decentralized exchange, right now people like to say, oh, why even bother? There's already a lot of decentralized exchanges out there. Totally aware of that, but I think this one is pretty unique nonetheless, just because, again, it's on Optimism and kind of the sort of, I would say, relation a little bit to Aerodrome and just, that kind of whole vibe that's going on in terms of just kind of the feeling. However, the decentralized finance market is predicted to reach over $200 billion by 2030, according to Grandview Research. Now, that's just a projection, but I think that's pretty cool nonetheless. And I don't think it's necessarily such a oversaturated market, if that makes sense, when it comes to these decentralized exchanges. However, also, the way I view it is that let's say Velo reaches the price of $2. Considering current circulating supply at that point, market cap would be around 1.8 billion, so nearly 2 billion, right? That's around a 40x from here. And the way you take a look at it is that doesn't seem like too ridiculous of a market cap. Like, for instance, we've seen Uni, right? And Uni, by the way, is the native token of Uniswap, which many people consider kind of like the most popular decentralized exchange right now. But we saw Uni reach over $20 billion in market cap, and that was back in 2021. Keep in mind, during the peak of that bull run, around 300 million crypto owners. Now we have over 600 million, and the way you take a look at it is that we haven't even really seen a fully fledged type of altcoin season during this cycle, let alone even seeing like Bitcoin reach 150 grand, 200 or 250 or 300, or even Ethereum at 10 grand, right? And we already have supposedly more crypto owners right now than ever before in history, and pretty much double when compared to the peak of the 2021 bull run. If Bitcoin were to reach greater heights, if Ethereum were to reach greater heights, if the altcoin season were to kind of, start really moving along, let's say, again, and altcoins start really gaining a lot of attention, would around 700 million crypto owners, or maybe even more than that, surprise me? It would not. However, only time will tell. But when I kind of consider those factors, again, Uni at one point, back in 2021 years ago, reaching a market cap of over 20 billion. I'm not saying, hey, maybe what could Uni do this time around? Let's say again, we kind of compare around a $1.8 billion market cap to something that Uni reached years ago. again, over 20 billion. It's not even like 10% of that, right? So then I wouldn't find it too surprising, but this is just the way to take a look at it. However, also when people like to say, oh, uni is good and all this type of stuff, totally aware of that. But would it make sense for uni to do around a 40x from where it is as of right now? The market cap's already kind of massive. When it comes to Velo, arguably doing a 40x, it wouldn't need as much volume to do that, right? When compared to uni. I'm not saying it will do that because something with a low market cap doesn't mean that it's automatically gonna do this or do that. But it would not, kind of make sense to me to be, so, I would say, excited for uni considering the market cap is already pretty massive. It's a good project in my opinion, but, or should I say when it comes to Uniswap, but then just the market cap is pretty massive. Velo is something that I'm focused on. Also Aero, by the way, which is Aerodrome's native token. But even besides all that, sometimes people like to say, okay, how soon? Now, usually altcoins, as a worst case scenario, they typically peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event. So 18 months from the last Bitcoin halving event would actually mean October this year because the last one did happen in April of last year. Now, I don't think it's a surefire timeline, or should I say date, because who knows, maybe it happens in November, December, Q1 of next year in 2026. I mean, again, that October timeline is just based off history. It doesn't mean that it's automatically going to be the same this time around. But whenever that timeline is, I just want to be prepared by just holding, waiting. That's it. I'm preparing for a marathon. That's the way to take a look at it. It's not a sprint for me. I'm just waiting for a moment in time as opposed to finding the perfect moment, if that makes sense. Some people like to say, why don't you pull up a price chart of Velo? Well, here's the thing. If I pulled up a price chart of Velo, do you think that the market is gonna listen to what I have to do on that price chart? No, right? And I see some people out there, they, pull up a price chart, draw a random triangle. They say, oh, this is gonna happen at this time. It doesn't. And then they just keep adjusting the triangle. Now, at that point, it's just drawing, right? Because let's say it doesn't happen at this time. They're like, oh, let's adjust it a little bit. It doesn't happen at that time as well. They adjust it even more. That's not my style, right? I'd rather focus on the fundamentals and just take a look at what the project's about. Because if I just take a look at the price chart of Velo, how will I know what it's really about? That's the way I view it. So again, I'm just staying patient, holding, and just waiting. That's pretty much it. But ultimately, the only thing that is within my control is myself. So I'm just going to stay and wait. If someone is wondering what I'm wearing, actually, this is something by Air, and it's spelled like AER. They have a store in New York, in San Francisco, and I own a lot of their products, by the way. And look, I'm just saying this just because I'm a fan. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Like, check this out, right? You can open the tab like this, and then it's kind of magnetic. I think it's just really awesome. But yeah, I'm a fan of, everyday carry and stuff like that. So I just like that. But yeah, and feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I greatly appreciate it. It's only the captain. I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.